Welcome guys to the second round, and for this one we actually have to do a replay review. Had a bit of an audio issue recording this a ways back, so we're going to just check this out. We did win the die roll in this match, and we're playing against actually a pretty interesting opponent's brew. So as you can see, we have to mulligan this one, and I think we end up keeping 6. And it's not ideal in most circumstances, but we do end up keeping it. And we're going to bottom the Rally the Peasants because we really need to find threats at this point. So we start with our tapped land here. Obviously the dual land is going to be preferable. That gives us the option of using the step. So we see Swiftwater Cliffs. That does open up the possibility of what the opponent is to a few things. And since we drew another land, we're going to end up cycling this step to try and find something a little more interesting. However, we're going to do it on the opponent's after we see more from the opponent, because there's nothing we could draw there on our turn that would change anything. We have all tapped lands, so there's no way that we're able to play anything on our turn, so we just do it on the opponent's. So we see the Fairy Miscreant and an Is It Boilerwork. So some weird kind of blue-red Delver, perhaps, not entirely clear. And we see Raise the Alarm. So again, knowing that the opponent's likely playing Counter Magic and almost certainly playing Spell Stutter Sprite, we do want to cast Raise the Alarm on our turn to get it to resolve. Then the opponent maybe cracks us with Ninja or something. We'll have to see what happens. They're rushing to the attack. They don't have a Ninja here, and they just pass. So there's not really much for us to do other than basically attack and pass the turn. From my vantage point, I don't really see a reason to cast Rally the Peasants. So that ends up being what we're doing. A really kind of slow start for both players here. Opponent comes in again, and not a lot happening, but then this kind of happens. This is the weird part. First weird part. We get a bolt to the face. Not to one of our guys, to the face. So this is leading me to believe that we're playing against some kind of weird Delver burn deck, dedicated burn, trying to burn us out. So my inclination is actually to go for Rally the Peasants here and just get in 6 damage. We're already slow, much slower than we want to be, and we know that Rally the Peasants gets around Spell Stutter Sprite right now. We also know that Doom Traveler doesn't get around Spell Stutter Sprite no matter what we do. So I decided not to play it. I'm not sure if that was ideal, but I decided to play around a potential Spell Stutter Sprite just to keep him from getting the value there. I'm still waiting on him to show us really anything else, because he did just go for a bolt to the face, and maybe he was trying to avoid discarding. But it's really weird for him to go to the face instead of to the guy. Now we have 3 bolts, and we have a flashback Rally the Peasants in hand. So we're actually fairly close to being able to kill the opponent. And we also know that, and it looks like I am going to flashback the Rally the Peasants just to see what the opponent is doing, maybe entice them. And we have a lethal amount of burn here, at least for the time being. That's not actually going to be the case much longer, because Swiftwater Cliffs hits the table. And now the opponent's going to come in, and I think they do have a Ninja now. Nope, still don't have one. So we're at 13, opponents at 10. We're very close for a victory, and we decided to just throw one of our bolts there. Opponent finally uses a Spell Stutter. So we're seeing that the opponent is willing to hold a Spell Stutter back for a very long period of time, or they just randomly drew it on that turn. We decided to attack into it because why not? And we're pretty close to getting the opponent back in burn range with the remaining bolts. And we do have a couple Doom Travelers to try and resolve. And let's see if they do. The first one does, so I'm kind of inclined to play the second one. And they both resolve. Coast is clear. Got the 2 bolts. And what else? Opponent is going to play a 5-drop now. It's a Mole Drifter. So this is very interesting indeed. Now it's almost like it's almost like an is it control deck with a little bit more card advantage through Fairy Miscreant and Spellstutter Sprite. So I'm trying to get that Mold Drifter out of the way. I could have gone to the face with these bolts, but I thought it would be better to try and push my 1/1s past the 2/2 creature, and I decide, because he does have a second Spellstutter, to use my second bolt on the Mold Drifter to get it to resolve. And we find Battle Screech. That's going to be really good for us. I decide to attack with probably 3 guys so that I can flash it back and still get in for damage. And that's exactly what happens. This game is probably close to being over. Yeah, he blocks with 1 Sprite. I'm not entirely sure why. Maybe that's just enough to survive Rally the Peasants at that point. And we just cast Battle Screech with Flashback. I tap all these lands because it's a little faster, and we have nothing else to even bluff. And we're pretty close to a victory here. If the opponent can't come up with like a main deck Electrickery or anything, they play Mold Drifter. We still have a bunch of guys in the air. We're probably going to be able to just suicide into the red zone. The opponent has all kinds of plays to make this turn, so they're close to potentially turning a corner. The problem is their life total is so low that we're very much putting them against the ropes, and we just drew a Squadron Hawk. So now we're basically all in. We're not going to play around a Game 1 Electrickery. We're going to attack, and we're going to play a bunch of Squadron Hawks. So he blocks with everything. He drops down to 3. We play as many Hawks as we can, which is just 2 for this turn, and then the opponent, draws a bunch of cards, preordains, plays Mold Drifter, and ponders again. They're at 3. We have too many guys on the board, and that should be the game. Let's hit the play button. Yeah, I think that's probably it. And we can check to see if they... Yeah, so they, with the preordain, they actually kept both cards, and then they didn't shuffle, and then as you see, the game's actually over. If you just look at the chat box, they did concede. So we'll go ahead and go to the next game. So I'm not exactly sure how I boarded. I certainly brought in Pyroblast for Mold Drifter and other counter spells. Probably cutting some of the ground game because their flyers are really what we need to contend with. I was expecting Delver of Secret, so it's likely that I brought in things like Flame Slash and Journey to Nowhere, and just drop some of the ground stuff like Mog War Marshal, kind of like we did in the first match. So we find a Plains. We're able to cast Thraben Inspector here. I actually need to probably slow it down a little bit. This is pretty cut and dry attacking, and I think I don't play the Squadron Hawk there. So because he left up open mana, I decided to try and conserve one of my best threats. Now he tapped out for Oracle, so I can not only burn it away to get the attack in, but I also get to cast Squadron Hawk here and set up for potential Battle Screech. However, I instead opt to go with the Thraben Inspector play. This is a little better against an Electrickery, and there's still a chance we find an untapped land and maybe want a Battle Screech, but probably not, just because we don't want to throw so much into... So we Hydroblast our attempt to remove a blocker. We still get to attack and play another Hawk, but we're basically trying to mitigate the effectiveness of Electrickery, which could really crush our game plan if we don't. So he attacks, and I think this time finally a Ninja comes through, so we at least see what's going on. He recasts the Seagate Oracle, and here we're going to actually cycle, because again, I don't really want to play too heavily into Electrickery. So I burn away the Ninja. It lets me attack with all my guys again, and lose nothing, and also get another land in play. I think we may have brought in Sen's Enlistment here. Again, it's going to be something. So now we have insurance against an Electrickery. What we don't have insurance against is an Electrickery with counter magic backup, and our opponent, as you can see, it has open mana. So we're going to basically wait and try and get them to do something against a Raise the Alarm. I'm going to slow it down a little bit. It's probably getting too fast for you to follow what's going on. So the opponent now bounced the Miscreant to hand with Ninja and didn't recast it. So that really telegraphs to us there's probably there's probably either 2 counters or there's Electrickery with a counter. I was trying to bait out one of their counters with Raise the Alarm. Didn't work, but now we're in a weird situation because we really need this to resolve so that all of these things are now live and don't die to a sweeper. So the problem being there, we don't have a lot to bait out in order to get that Lumen Thread field to hit the table, especially when the opponent is clearly telegraphing 2 permission spells. So I'm not throwing any guys into the Oracle. We could throw Inspector, but if he casts Electrickery, we lose the Inspector too. Meaning we could attack with both Inspectors and get 1 point of damage through. So here, I'm actually playing nothing. I thought about playing the Hawk, but I said, you know what? Opponent's at 9. We have 6 guys in play. It's really on the opponent to be able to do something to force us to add more to our board. So nothing happens yet, and now we have another land. So with the other land here, it does open up our potential to play a bunch of stuff in one turn. However, we're still in the same position basically we were last turn. Fortunately for us, this is what happens. We basically force the opponent's hand. So now this is going to get us into a favorable position where we do get to rally off, and then if they do have an answer to that, we get a free shot at resolving the field here. So he does have a counterspell. So the Electrickery is going to resolve, which is somewhat of a hit, but we have so much saved up in hand that we are going to be able to flood the board once more, basically replenish our board position, and keep on trucking. So now our guys are ultimately impervious to any of his sweepers, and we get to flash it back. We can basically play almost without any repercussion, though we do see that the opponent's still got some bolts and stuff. They are flooding the ground, at least, with some guys, and they're really just cycling into more and more threats. So even though us basically guy for guy, and they're seeing more cards. So that could play a role here, depending on how these next few turns play out. So this is really interesting because I decided not to play another pair of Hawks. And ultimately I'm trying to play around Spell Stutter, but that's not going to work too well. So it puts us in just a weird spot where we keep attacking. I mean, they are at 6, they're at a low life total, but they are also just outpacing us and doing the thing that we want to be doing, which is flooding the board with guys. It's a little problematic for us, and we're even in a weird position where our guys are so big that the opponent's not able to attack us. So I'm going to slow it down just a little bit more for you to see. We ultimately decide, okay, I think we have no choice but to add to the board, so we have to play into the Spell Stutter sprites. The opponent fortunately only had the 1 there, so we got 2 more guys through. And as you can see, I put some more value in the Doom Traveler as a threat than I did the Squadron Hawk, because it's going to be able to block and then also fly. We want to take note that the opponent has not made proper use of the Flare Husk either. He could be equipping a Ninja, crashing through our X3s, and then equipping a Flyer on defense, but he's not doing that. You'll notice we're also holding a land. It's not just to bluff, it's because we've boarded into Sen's Enlistment. So we want to hold lands in order to be able to use the Retrace ability and flood the board under best case scenario. But you can just look at the board right now. The opponent has got everything basically on lock, and we're hitting lands at points in time where we don't want to be. So I offer up just about everything in order to shrink what they're doing in the air. And sending the Doom Traveler was not exactly correct because I didn't factor in the concept of him just blocking with a guy that wouldn't kill it. I was trying to get more guys into the air. Didn't work out, didn't pan out, and the opponent is basically firebolting our guys away while continuing to see more cards. Got even more ninjas going on, and you know, if you cast ninja to get back your Mole Drifter, you're basically doing it absolutely correctly. So I'm trying to Pyroblast the Mole Drifter. He lets that happen. It's not really a big deal to him because he's got so much going, and we're just trying to do what we can, diminish his board presence. But it's so lopsided at this point that it's all but a foregone conclusion. We're probably going to Game 3. We're able to get off that Battle Screech, but that's just going to be, well, we'll see what happens. I mean, the opponent needs to get more in the air in order to counteract the Battle Screech, but he's got these Fire Bolts too. The Fire Bolts are working wonders for him, and he's hitting even more Mole Drifters. So much card advantage. He's only got 20 cards in the library. We still have 32, so you can see how lopsided that dynamic is right now. And the opponent is just hitting more and more. This is definitely a great example of the snowball effect, where the more Mole Drifters you find, that you cast, the more additional Mole Drifters you'll find, the more additional bits of card draw you'll be able to hit. And it's just too far of a deficit for us to ever fully recover from. So I'm basically just going to let this continue to play out here. And you'll see that even though we went with a Raise the Alarm on the opponent's upkeep to just try and do something, there's already just a wave of creatures that we're not going to be able to contend with. And I just ultimately took a block that was still lethal damage because I was trying to remove time from my opponent's clock. So I'm realizing that these games are going so long, we may be actually able to win the game via timeout. So keep that in mind as we go into Game 3. We're on the play. I don't think we change all that much being on the play. We still want to punish them with things like Pyroblast and Sen's Enlistment. So this is how things pan out here. Just a slow start for us, not really a lot of untapped lands, not a lot of threats coming down, and it's going to be on us to want to leave up the Sacrifice and the Bolt instead of just throwing a Squadron Hawk into Counterspell. Now we do get either Battle Screech or Hawk, depending on how we want to do this. And this time I actually draw the card instead of burn away the Oracle. And as you can see, we're also flashing this back because we now have Remotion Rally. So we have kind of a get-out-of-jail-free card here where he can't sweep us, because we do have the planes on the battlefield and all that. And he basically does nothing. We get to fly over, and we have a second rally now. So as long as I keep rallies going here, I'll slow it down a little bit. As long as I keep enough guys to have double rally, we're going to be very safe, because he would then need Electrickery plus 2 counters or 1 counter plus 2 Electrickeries. That's not very likely. So I'm always going to leave 2 guys around to be able to rally twice. I went to remove his Oracle. He tried to sprite it, but then I burned the sprite in response. That just gives us a completely clear board, and we ultimately need to win this not incredibly quickly, but we can't let the game drag out too long, because we saw what happened in Game 2. When that happens, we just get completely outclassed. So this is something we have to try and finish somewhat quickly. And our board position looks great, especially with those 2 rallies to back up. So I'll go ahead and speed it up a little more. Opponent preordains, they cast Flare Husk, and then they just pass. So that is a really weak turn for them. Hopefully they're setting up something a little better. And I just play another Squadron Hawk. You'll notice that the game ended. What ended up happening here is the opponent disconnected with about, I want to say, 4 or 5 minutes left on the clock, and then their clock just ran out. There was nothing else to happen. So there was nothing else to really say or do about it, rather. And this is actually good that we're doing the replay, because in the original version, it was just me kind of sitting, twiddling my thumbs, and trying to see if the opponent was really around, or going to come back or sign back in or do anything, but they didn't. They just disconnected. I think even despite the timing out factor and the disconnecting, we still were in just such a commanding position. I couldn't really think in my mind of any way the opponent could get out of this much pressure, the double Remotion Rally, and more threats in hand to continue pushing. So I think we would have won regardless, but we do kind of win on the technicality here. So thank you guys for watching. We will go to the next round right now.